Had a client once tell me this story. She said, 6 months after my dad's funeral, I was at the grocery store buying groceries when I ran into a family friend. The friend looked at me with this bright, wide smile and said, "It's so good to see you back to normal." My client continued, "I smiled and nodded because what else do you do?" But inside I wanted to scream because I wasn't back to normal. I was still crying in my car after work, still feeling like a ghost in meetings, and still looking around and wondering why no one was talking about what happens after the casseroles and cards stop coming. If you felt that too, this video is for you. So if you've had someone tell you they're glad to see you back when you felt anything but back, that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Sally Wright, and today we're going to talk about what happens with grief when the world thinks you should be done grieving. Because the months when the flowers have wilted and the sympathy cards have stopped coming and everyone expects you to be moving on, those can truly be the hardest. Because here's what no one tells you. For many people, grief gets harder before it gets easier. And the months after the funeral, they're their own kind of grief. And they deserve their own attention. So I'd like to start by dismissing a myth. And this myth might be causing you pain right now. So let's dismantle it. The myth is grief follows a neat timeline. Our culture seems to have the idea that grief is like a cold. It's acute for a while, and then you recover, and then you get back to normal. I mean, we talk about the year of firsts, as if after 365 days, you get to somehow graduate from grief. But as any seasoned grief traveler knows, in some ways, there's no end to grief. But let's see what the science tells us. There's grief research that tells us that symptoms often peak at about 6 to 12 months after a loss, not in the first few months. And if we think about this logically, in the first few months after a funeral, you're in crisis mode. Your body is flooded with the stress hormones that actually numb some of the pain. You're busy with arrangements and legal issues and thank you notes, and people are checking on you constantly. But at 6 months, the adrenaline has worn off, the busy work is done, the support has decreased, and you're left with the reality that the person you loved so deeply is never coming back. So if you're feeling worse at 6 months than you did at 3 months or than 2 weeks after, you are not going backwards. In fact, you're going deeper into the real work of grief. So I want to share 3 truths about grief after the funeral that I tell my clients. Truth number 1. Emotional crash often comes months after the funeral, not immediately after. So if you're not crying at the funeral or you haven't cried yet, that's okay. So in the first few months, you're running on adrenaline and shock, and your nervous system is in survival mode. You might feel numb, disconnected, like you're moving through fog. And people often say at that moment, "Oh, you're handling it so well." But at around the 3 to 6 month mark, the shock begins to wear off, the reality sets in, and suddenly you're feeling all of those feelings that you weren't feeling before. I had a client tell me, everyone kept saying how strong I was at the funeral. But 4 months after, I couldn't get out of bed. I thought I was having a breakdown, but I think I was finally having my grief surface. And that's what I needed. So this delayed reaction is not a failure. It's your nervous system finally feeling safe enough to process what happened. Okay, truth 2. People stop checking in right when you need it most. So typically in weeks 1 to 2, you get flowers and casseroles and constant texts asking how you are. Months 1 and 2, you have occasional check-ins. How are you holding up? And then right around month 3, the world seems to have moved on. There's just kind of silence. But you haven't moved on. You're still processing. You're still missing them every day. You're still figuring out how to live in a world without them. Maybe you're still reaching for your phone to call them at the same time every day. Maybe you're even expecting them to walk through that door. Full truth, I kept my dad's phone number in my phone for long over a year. I mean, like I think I kept it until that phone died, because deleting it somehow felt wrong. And so when people asked how I was doing, I'd just say fine, because I could tell they expected me to be fine by then. So the reality is the silence from others doesn't mean your grief isn't valid. It means our culture is uncomfortable with long-term grief. But your grief doesn't follow their timeline. It follows your timeline. Okay, truth number 3. Your body still might be holding on to the loss, even months later. When someone central to your life dies, your nervous system experiences as a threat to your survival. Even months later, your body might still be in fight or flight mode. So if you're wondering what fight or flight mode looks like in your body, it can be exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, getting sick more often than you were before, having regular digestive issues, trouble concentrating, feeling jumpy or on edge, even sleep problems. One client told me, I thought I was losing my mind. I couldn't remember simple things like where I had left my keys. I'd walk into a room and even forget while I was there. My doctor is the one who told me it might be grief brain, that my nervous system was still using so much energy to process the loss that there wasn't much left for daily functioning. Your body needs time to recalibrate. And it's going to take longer than the 3 days that your employer gave you. Most people don't start feeling physically normal again until 12 to 8 months after a major loss. And that's with really great support and care. So what actually happens during these months when everyone thinks you should be better, but you're not? Here are 3 strategies to help. First, normalize your timeline. Stop comparing your grief to others' expectations. Research shows that most people are still actively grieving 18 to 24 months after losing a parent. Some studies suggest that it can take 3 to 5 years before you feel like you've integrated that loss into your life. So give yourself permission. Tell yourself, I'm still grieving, and that's normal. Or you can tell yourself, my timeline is my own. Or I'm exactly where I need to be in this process. And so when people ask you how you're doing, here are some things you can tell them. I'm healing, but grief doesn't follow a schedule. Or I'm learning to carry grief differently, but it's taking time. Or even thank you for caring enough to ask. This is what my grief looks like right now. And then you tell them what you're feeling. Okay, strategy number 2. You might create your own support. So when the world has moved on, sometimes you just have to make your own support strategies. So this might look like joining a grief support group, connecting with others who have lost parents, perhaps even hiring a grief coach like me, maybe scheduling regular check-ins with your friends who understand. Or maybe you need to find a therapist who specializes in grief. There are tons of online grief communities and grief-specific social media groups and virtual support meetings. You truly don't have to do this alone simply because people have stopped asking. So third, honor your body's needs. Your body is working really hard during this process, and so it might need some extra support. But let me be clear, this is not the bubble bath self-care. This is survival self-care. So here's what this might look like for you. Sleep when you need to sleep. Eat nourishing food, even when you don't feel like it. Move your body gently. Grief gets stored in our tissues, so going for an easy walk. Limit alcohol and caffeine, which can worsen anxiety. Get outside in the natural light daily. Your nervous system needs help recalibrating. So perhaps you could try some deep breathing exercises or some muscle relaxation techniques, gentle yoga or stretching. Go for a walk out in nature, even if that means walking around your front yard barefoot for 20 minutes. Even a warm bath or shower can really help your nervous system recalibrate. Be patient with your body. Be patient with your whole self. It's doing enormous work processing this loss. The fatigue, the brain fog, the emotional overwhelm, these are all signs that your system is working hard to heal. And I want to take this moment to address when normal grief might need additional support. And when I say additional support, I mean a couple of different things. So, consider seeking a professional therapist help if you're experiencing thoughts to hurt yourself or someone else, a complete inability to function for weeks at a time, substance abuse to cope with the pain, severe depression that doesn't lift, or if you're experiencing panic attacks or severe anxiety, that's when you call a mental health professional, a therapist. There's a difference between normal and complicated grief. Normal grief allows you to function most of the time. Maybe you're needing extra support and tools, perhaps from a grief coach like me, even if you're sad. But complicated grief makes basic functioning consistently difficult. And so if you're concerned, reach out to a grief coach, a therapist, or your doctor. There's no shame in needing extra support. So as we close, I want you to look at the person who told you they're glad to see you back to normal. Look at them with compassion. They truly mean well. They're just uncomfortable with grief. But you don't have to be back to anything. You're not behind, you're not broken, and you're not taking too long. You're grieving someone who mattered enormously to you. And that kind of love doesn't disappear on anyone else's timeline. The months after the funeral, when the world expects you to be moving on, but you're still learning how to breathe, these months matter. Your grief during this time is valid. Your struggle is real, and your timeline is your own. So if you're 6 months out, 12 months out, 18 months out, and still feeling the weight of your loss, you're not doing it wrong. Honestly, you're doing it honestly. So if this resonated with you, please share it with someone else who might be feeling alone in their extended grief. And in the comments, tell me, what's one thing you wish people understood about grief after the funeral? So I invite you to subscribe. I put videos out at least weekly, sometimes more than one in a week. And so I invite you to subscribe and share with all those you know who are grieving immense losses in their life. And so with that, I wish you a wonderful day.